Good afternoon, everybody. How are we feeling today? My. It's a beautiful day to be alive. My soul is saying that I was glad to see another day. Some folks that went to sleep last night didn't wake up today. So I don't know about you, but I'm delighted to be united with you all here today in attendance and be a part of this MLK Youth Conference. And so I'm part of the Pentecostal Tabernacle Church in Cambridge. And again, delighted to be here. I want to thank all the organizers, the program planners, the workshop leaders, the STEP team, the Greater Framingham Community Church for putting this conference together. Let's give them a round of applause. I appreciate that the church is a beacon of hope in the community and doing extraordinary work under the leadership of the Reverend Dr. Lloyd to further the gospel of Christ, ministering to the needs of the community. I want to give a special thanks to Sister Lisa Cargill, who you just heard right before I took the mic here, who I met in 2018 at the convention for the Massachusetts Nurses Association. I was fortunate to do the invocation there, and we've gotten an opportunity to meet there, and we've been connected ever since, and she's doing extraordinary work, so let's give her a round of applause. We are gathered here today to celebrate the life of the one Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and reflect on the theme, keeping the dream alive. It starts with me. Before we speak to the relevance of that theme in today's world, I want to point out that on January 15th, 2 days from now, America will celebrate Dr. King as one of the most radical thinkers and revolutionaries in the 20th century. Dr. King is arguably the most honored non-elected citizen in the history of the United States of America, as this is evident by the fact that Dr. King is the only American to have a federal holiday named in his honor without having served a day in public office, and he having a 30-foot stone sculpture, which is in Washington, D.C. It's interesting, brothers and sisters, Monday will be the 38th year of Dr. King, of the federal holiday being observed, respected for being a civil rights activist who delivered the I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington in 1963, and then 5 years later, his life ends tragically being assassinated in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. It's interesting to note that Dr. King was in Memphis to support and stand in solidarity with striking garbage workers in their efforts to fight for human dignity and higher wages. Most Americans can refer to the I Have a Dream speech as this, and they can tell you that that is one of Dr. King's most memorable speeches. However, many cannot recall, or many don't recall the speech from April 4th, 1967, entitled Beyond Vietnam, delivered at the Riverside Church in New York. It's interesting when we juxtapose Dr. King, I Have a Dream speech, and the Beyond Vietnam speech, there are two different arguments, brothers and sisters, that Dr. King is making. The sanitized retelling of King's life leaves us at his dream. The realistic retelling of Dr. King's life suggests to us that he had a sharp critique of the American government practices as he became more radical. Many of you may recall from the I Have a Dream speech, this particular quote, it is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, and we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. In the Beyond Vietnam speech, One of the quotes that is striking and that protrudes and sticks out to me is when Dr. King said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual doom." Another quote that Dr. King said in that same speech: "If we are taking the black young men who have been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Harlem, it essentially is an atrocity." I know that it's popular to quote Dr. King nowadays, and it's popular to tweet Dr. King nowadays, and we know that there are countless of schools and streets named in Dr. King's honor. But the reality of it is that in 1968, according to the Harris poll, Dr. King had a 75% disapproval rate from the public. This was a reaction to the Beyond Vietnam speech in 1967. The New York Times editorial board criticized Dr. King and said that he was doing a disservice to both the cause of civil rights and the war in Vietnam. The Washington Post editorial board said that King had diminished, and I quote, "diminished his usefulness to his cause, his country, and his people." 168 newspapers denounced him. Friends told him to stay focused on fighting for civil rights and leave international injustice issues alone, but yet King persisted on. Dr. King understood that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It's interesting because in the book entitled "I Am Somebody: Why Jesse Jackson Matters," published in 2021, Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was a disciple of King and worked very closely with him, said, and I quote, "In his final year of life, King could not book a speech in a large black church or a college campus. He could not get a book deal, and leaders from both the Democratic and Republican Party verbally criticized him, attacked him. Allies verbally attacked him, with a large percentage of blacks believing that King offering his thoughts on the Vietnam War would alienate the presidential administration at the time, the Johnson administration, from the civil rights movement." One lesson that we can learn from Dr. King, sisters and brothers, is that when you start speaking truth to power, invariably you're going to have some haters. Somebody sound like that when they know what it's like to have some haters and some doubters. Am I right about it? You see, Mahatma Gandhi, Frederick Douglass, Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, Ida B. Wells, Marcus Garvey, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and so many more of truth tellers and folks who stood boldly to proclaim the truth had haters. The Bible says it this way: woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for so they did your ancestors treated the false prophets, found in Luke 6:26. It's interesting that, yes, you are going to have some haters drinking and sipping some haterade out of the cup of despair when you are a truth teller. But don't fret. Walk in your calling. Walk in your purpose that God has for you, because I read somewhere that in the presence of your enemy, God will prepare a table and anoint your head with oil, that your cup runneth over. So you ain't even got to worry about the detractors and people who may not like you, because you're telling the truth. Just continue to tell the truth. Am I right about it? When we think of Dr. King's dream, brothers and sisters, we are living in a society with much trouble in our world. And when we think of Dr. King's dream of equality and fairness, it seems like when we look realistically in the world, it seems like that dream is not coming to fruition anytime soon. It's interesting when we think about that there are approximately 41 million people that are in poverty in the United States, and there are 38 million U.S. households that find water bills unaffordable, and we know that the poor is mostly impacted. However, brothers and sisters, I believe out of all the justice issues that we have in our life, the preeminent issue of our time is climate change. Climate change is defined as the change in the Earth's global temperature and weather patterns. It's interesting to think about climate change because climate change is not a single special interest issue alone, but it is rather multifaceted, and it is a complex crisis affecting public health, foreign policy, jobs in the economy, labor, civil rights, immigration, agriculture, the food supply, housing, transportation, and every facet of our human lives. It's interesting because the effects of climate change are obvious and deadly around the world. And I know we mostly have young folks in this room, and we know that if we don't ensure that we have a habitable planet for the future, then we won't have a future, we won't have a planet to call home. It's interesting because heat waves, droughts, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes are killing people and disrupting lives around the world. Wildfires are burning with an unprecedented frequency and intensity, including in places that it used to rarely ever burn. The climate crisis represents an urgent and existential threat, with the international consensus of scientists agreeing that humanity must drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius without endangering the existence of humans. But we know that climate change is not equally felt across communities. Low-income communities and communities of color are harmed the most by the climate crisis and continue to be targeted as sites for oil and gas infrastructure, landfills, hazardous waste dumps, diminishing the quality of air, water, land, causing immense damage and health issues that are sometimes deadly. We cannot sit idly by while underprivileged communities suffer from the effects of climate change. We cannot sit idly by here in Massachusetts while this is going on. I am proud to lead the climate justice work at Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action is a national organization with over 10 chapters in various different states, and our mission is to protect our environment, health, economic well-being, and community quality of life. These are not mere words. We live them every day as we advocate for clean water and environmental justice for all people, because we believe that everyone should have access to clean water and drinking water. Am I right about that, sisters and brothers? Part of my work is overseeing our energy efficiency work in 5 cities here in Massachusetts, where the focus of our work is to help residents sign up for free energy inspections in their homes/apartments, so this can help reduce their energy bills every month. And for those who make up to 60% of the area median income, they can get free energy upgrades after the inspection. Our work here in Massachusetts also focuses on policy advocacy as communities that are most harmed, as we believe communities that are most harmed by the climate crisis should be closest to the power. Part of my work also includes advocating for more air quality monitoring stations to be placed in communities of color to monitor how air pollution is impacting that community. We also work with coalitions with other environmental organizations across the state, with environmental organizations in coalition fighting the fight of environmental justice. At Clean Water Action, we envision a society where everyone has access to clean water and clean energy. We envision a society where our clean water laws are strong and useful in protecting water and people's health. We envision a society where our water is protected from dirty energy threats, We envision a world in which all people have access to quality health care, and elected offices are filled with folks who are committed to tackling the climate crisis and centering environmental justice in their policy making. Realistically, brothers and sisters, we are living in some dark and difficult days, the likes of which we've never seen before. If we're honest about it, and if we're honest about where we are, these last few years have been difficult as a society. As conflict continues to erupt across the globe, causing people to flee, we have seen race-based discrimination at the borders. COVID-19 keeps attacking communities, and we have seen how community of colors have been disproportionately impacted by COVID because those communities have historically been redlined, marginalized, and disinvested by local government. Let alone, we are seeing more hate speech and violence directed at racial minorities. The federal government has sent billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine and Israel in their respective ongoing wars. To me, there seems to be money to fund wars, but not money to feed the poor. Am I right about it? These are just a myriad, and these are just some of the issues that are plaguing our world today. Not to mention that we need police reform, we need more laws that strengthen voting rights, solutions on economical and educational disparities in America, as progress in these areas have been stymied by culture wars and partisan gridlock in Washington and nationwide. That's why I was so glad when the young people were here and they were talking about what's next and looking forward to what's next, because I believe our future is bright. I believe our young people are not all caught up in being in wayward ways, but we have some extraordinary young people that are willing to, let's get around the court. And we have those extraordinary young people sitting here in Framingham State. In our world, there are floods of chaos, storms of confusions, and winds of mayhem blowing. But I am a prisoner of hope. It was Dr. King that said, in the darkest hour, that's when you can see the stars shine brightly. It is only at the darkest of night when you can see the stars shine brightly. We are the stars that will shine brightly as we take a stand for justice. We all have a role to play in making our world a better place. You may be wondering, how do we live out the theme, keep the dream alive? It starts with me. One way you can do this, and one way we can do this, is to find out what your passion is and do that. Find out ways that you can improve your community and do that. Because you can make a difference, and your life does matter. I'm reminded of the quote from Howard Vernon, who said, don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is for people to come alive. Is that right, brothers and sisters? At this critical cross moment in our history, we need climate justice activists.
That's right.
To come together with Black Lives Matter activists. Right. To come together with social justice activists. Right. To join hands with youth activists. Right. To join hands with political leaders who are advocating for just policies, and to join with human rights activists, and these hands to join with housing justice advocates, and these hands to join with reproductive rights activists, and these hands to join with immigrants activists, and these hands to join and connect the descendants of slave and slave owners. And we need these hands to join with Christian and Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and people of faith and people of moral conscience and people with other faith that subscribe to other faith traditions. And then the arc of the moral universe will be bent towards justice. When all these hands connect, our togetherness becomes an instrument of redemption. When all these hands connect, we will make sure that we live in a society that is just, sustainable, and habitable for ourselves and future generations. When all these hands connect, we will make sure that the fight for environmental justice and social justice never die, and our right to live in a clean environment will never be taken away or forfeited for anybody, anytime, anywhere. Am I right about it? As I close, when all these hands connect, then we'll see the lion laying down with the lamb. But until then, we ought to continue to stand on the shoulders of civil rights pioneers like Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer and many others until the fight for justice is achieved and until the lion lays down with the lamb. We ought to continue to create a beloved community until the lion lays down with the lamb. We ought to fight for economic, racial, and social justice until the lion lays down the lamb, or lays down with the lamb. We ought to fight for environmental justice. We ought to continue to fight for justice as it rolls down like a river and righteousness like a mighty stream. And then, when we see the lion laying down with the lamb, then we know we can live in a just and equitable society. And I'm so glad that we will continue to fight until we are a world that is united and fighting against injustice. Am I right about it? Thank you today.